Hey, I got a question for you on this week's show. Is this a DSLR? Is it? Think. Is it a DSLR? Yes or no? That's the question for this week's episode, plus some feedback from another loyal hands-on photography listener. Y'all stay tuned.
This is TWiT.
This episode of Hands on Photography is brought to you by Nareva. Traditional audio conferencing systems can entail lots of components. Installation can take days, and you might not get the mic coverage you need. That's complex, expensive. But Nareva Audio is easy to install and manage. No technicians required. And you get true full room coverage. That's easy economical. Learn more at nareva.com. Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am Pruitt, and this is Hands on Photography here on TWiT TV. I hope y'all are doing well. I am unbelievable as always. Y'all, I swear, I really do enjoy sitting down each and every Thursday to share different tips and tricks to help make you a better photographer, as well as a better post processor. And from time to time, I also have the honor and pleasure to sit down with another professional photographer that can share some amazing tips and tricks that's going to help you out as well. But this week, I'm going to dive into a bit of your listener feedback, viewer feedback, if you will, as well as a couple other things here. But before we get into that, let me just say formally, welcome to all of you new folks checking out the show. I appreciate y'all popping over here and hopping in and checking out Hands-On Photography. It really does mean a lot. If this is your first time here, go ahead and hit subscribe in whatever podcast app that you're using to enjoy this wonderful show on. We're available on all of those podcast apps that are out there because we're using old school RSS technology. No proprietary stuff here, folks. Yeah, check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google's, our YouTube channel, all that good stuff. Or just head on over to the website, twit.tv/hop. That's twit.tv/HOP for Hands-On Photography. And you'll see all of our previous episodes with all of the show notes and all of the links and stuff there. And you'll see all of our subscription options over there as well. Okay, thank you very much. Now, let's go ahead and get started with this week's episode. Okay, so first off, I want to bring up an article that I came across from the fine folks at Petapixel, and it made me laugh a little bit, but it's okay. You know, it happens. And the article reads as people really don't know what a DSLR is. People have no idea what a DSLR actually is, as per Petapixel. And what happened was Petapixel found an article from the New York Post online that's mentioning the, quote, 8 best DSLR cameras for beginners and the pros to buy on Amazon. Okay. I thought this was funny because if you look at the thumbnail of the article, there's 3 camera bodies there, and 2 of those 3 camera bodies are DSLRs, and 1 is an actual mirrorless camera. The article continues to give you a couple of different specs and things to look out for as far as the different camera models. As they quote, the best DSLR camera selected include the Canon Rebel T7, Canon M50 Mark II, the Canon 90D, the Nikon D7500, the Sony A7, and on and on and on and on. Even the Olympus OMD EM1 Mark II. Again, this is all great, but unfortunately, not all of those are DSLRs. The Canon M50 is an actual mirrorless camera. It's a tiny little small-ish mirrorless camera with an APS-C crop sensor. And that's not a DSLR. I think what's happening today is DSLRs are just starting to turn into the whole moniker, like the way photocopies went from photocopies to a Xerox, or Kleenex is now the actual tissue to blow your nose or whatever. People say, can you get me a Kleenex, when they really just mean a tissue. And I hope that we can sort of fix that because, again, they're not all DSLRs, especially nowadays that the DSLR market is pretty much dead. If it's not dead, it's hanging on by a thread. So if you were to walk up into a store and say, hey, I'm looking for the latest DSLR, they're probably going to say, here's one from 8 years ago, something like that. So yeah, let's just take a look back. Go back to episode 1 of Hands On Photography. That's twit.tv/hop/episode 1. And you'll see my discussion breaking down the differences between a DSLR versus a mirrorless camera. And they're totally different. Yes, you're going to get great images from both, but the technology is not necessarily the same thing. I thought that was funny. Shout out to Petapixel for pointing that out because I don't read the New York Post, not on purpose anyway, but I thought it was funny and thought it was worth mentioning. So thank you again, Petapixel, for bringing that up. Now, next, I want to get into some feedback from one of our awesome Hands On Photography listeners. But before we do that, I want to pause for a second and take a break to thank this week's great sponsor. This episode of Hands On Photography is brought to you by Nareva, complicated and costly. That has been the state of audio and conferencing for larger spaces for quite a long time. Choosing a traditional system might entail difficult design software and selecting from a dizzying array of separate mics and speakers and DSPs and a whole lot of other tech. Good grief. Installation usually requires some form of an outside technician to come in, and it's quite expensive most of the time. It could take your whole room offline for a couple days if it has to, just to get everything installed. The industry was definitely primed for, some type of leap in tech that can, help transform all of this stuff for our conferencing, and just something that can make it way more simplified than what it used to be, But now we have the fine folks at Nareva that has made that leap and created a revolutionary microphone mist technology. With this patented technology, 1 or 2 integrated microphone and speaker bars fill a room with thousands of virtual microphones. That's amazing. There are no dead zones and everyone can be heard everywhere in the room. Meeting and a class participant can simply talk and move naturally into space and still be heard by the remote participants. Thanks to the continuous auto calibration, your rooms are instantly and always ready with optimized audio. No outside techs required. Nareva has also simplified installation. Yeah, really simplified. It's pretty much like a 30-minute DIY job. That means big savings on your time and the cost compared to those traditional systems. They've simplified management too. So with Nareva's console, it gives IT the power to monitor, manage, and adjust their systems from anywhere. No need for IT to go from room to room. So ask yourself if you want to go with the costly, complicated traditional system or make the leap to simple and economical Nareva. So go on over there and learn more at Nareva.com. That's Nureva.com. And we thank Nareva for their support of this week's show. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get started with some wonderful feedback from one of you fine hands-on photography listeners. Let's switch my screen. Here we go. All right, this message comes in via hop@twit.tv over email. It says, "Hi, Ant. I am from Sydney, Australia, and planning a trip to visit the USA in April next year. After talking to a few people, they all suggested to get a camera to take pics and videos over a smartphone, so I decided to invest in a Canon M50 II with 2 lenses, being the 15 to 45 millimeter and the 55 to 200 millimeter. Yeah. In your opinion, is that a decent choice for a beginner?" Okay. And he continues, "I also finally took the camera out and took some night shots using the Scene Night Auto Mode. And in my opinion, I feel I had 3 of my 8 photos turn out okay from my adventure. I have not edited these at all. Did you have any tips for someone that has just stepped up from loving taking pics on my iPhone?" This message comes from Mark Parrott, And he also mentions, yes, I am okay with you sharing the below pics during the show if you want to. All right. So Mr. Parrott, thank you so much for sending this message, and thank you for sending those photos regarding the Canon M50. All right. I spoke about this a couple episodes back to start out the year because people were trying to get cameras for the holidays and things like that. And the Canon M50 Mark II is definitely one of the cameras that I mentioned. Heck, as a matter of fact, back on episode 88, Miss Vanessa Joy, the Canon Explorer of Light, joined me here on the show, and we talked about budget-friendly cameras and how those budget-friendly cameras can really shine, if you know what you're doing. And one of the cameras that she mentioned, the Canon M50 Mark II. So it goes without saying, that is a really nice camera for the beginners. It's perfectly capable of creating great shots. Same goes for the Sony A6400. That's a camera that's a mirrorless design, just like the M50, that is small enough and really, really great when it comes to its sensor and the image quality that it produces. Now, is that something that's for the person that's used to just picking up the iPhone and just hitting the button and letting the AI do its thing? I think so. Yeah, but you can say that about pretty much any camera because cameras all come with these different dials and modes and things like that. And they always have some sort of a automatic mode that's going to perform similar to how a phone's AI will perform, but the phone would typically be a little bit better. I'm sorry to say that. But the automatic mode or automatic mode is usually quite okay. And with that, I tend to tell people to just, shoot with that mode from time to time. But it's the moment that you have some free time to just sort of dink around and goof off with your camera, please do so by switching it on over to manual mode. What I did when I started getting more and more into photography, I would take just the mornings on a weekend or something or an evening where I wasn't really doing anything and just take my camera and grab something as simple as, I don't know, I'll just say this other camera, just some random object, put it on a table, set a light up or whatever, where there's a lamp or an overhead light or what have you. And I would snap photos of that object. And as I would snap a photo, I would change the settings for like shutter speed, and see what happens with the same shot with a different shutter speed, or change the aperture or change the ISO. And all of that was helping me to further understand the exposure triangle. I believe we talked about the exposure triangle back on episode 3 or episode 4 of the show. Go back and check that out. It really does help if you can just experiment with it. 9 times out of 10, though, the green dial that's set up on most cameras today, that's the one that the manufacturers want most beginners to use just to get out there and point and shoot, if you will. I typically tell people to try the aperture priority mode that is shown up on the dial. I believe it's usually AV mode. I can't remember right off the top of my head, but if you just turn it to AV on your camera, that's going to tell your camera to, all right, I need you to meter the scene and set the aperture opening to based on what the scene is looking at. Okay. And then it'll fix the shutter speed and so forth. And you're usually going to get a really nice shot in that mode versus the green dial that's set for air quotes automatic. So that's my 2 cents on that. But you sent in some photos that you snapped with this, and I am more than happy to share these images with the listeners. So let's hop on over into Lightroom and check out these images. Okay, so we are now in Lightroom, and here he got 3 images in here, and I want to look at these in a specific order. So we'll start with this one here, even though it's the last one in the row. Looks like he shot it at 1/80th of a second, according to the metadata here. 1/80th of a second at aperture f5, 12,800 ISO. Whew, that's pretty high. That's a very, very, very high number. And he's shooting it at 83 millimeter on the focal length. Okay, and then the next one to that same scene, but it is shot at 100 millimeters, so it's a little bit tighter, and it still has the same shutter speed and ISO and so forth for the exposure. Okay, so my first critique, if I look at your first image here, I enjoy the tighter focal length better, because with this image, you have a lot of dead space here. Okay, this is just black dead space. If that was the water or something like that, that would have been a little bit more pleasing. But right here, this is all just dead space, so it really doesn't do anything for me. And of course, we got to get it straightened out on the horizon, like so. There we go. So now that already looks better, but I highly recommend the other one because of the tighter focal length, because it gives you, it just fills the frame a little bit better. This is just too much dead space there. I know when we've talked about in the past that landscape photography or just photography out in the field, if you will, it works best when you have different layers and you can sort of work your eye through the image. And we don't really have that in this instance. So shooting something tighter definitely works best. Now let's go on over to the other image. Okay. And again, we'll go ahead and straighten this out because it's just off a little bit. There you go. Got it. All right. Now this is getting better because of the focal length, but let's pixel peep a little bit and check out the potential issues with that really, really high ISO. So I'm going to set my screen to a little bit tighter. So let's go with like, not 25%, 200%. There we go. And when I sort of drag through this screen here, the image quality ain't that bad. It's not as sharp as I would like for it to be. But what's impressive is the noise is nowhere near as bad as I thought it would be. That's probably quite possibly because of the shutter speed being at 1/80th of a second. That is a slow shutter, in air quotes, slow shutter, but it's not as slow as a 1 second shutter or slower, because that tends to lead to heat, and that heat tends to lead to image noise on your image processor. So I think that's why you didn't get a lot of noise. But I think overall, this could be a little bit better if you were able to lock in focus a little bit more. My tip would be if you could somehow lock focus on something like this peak here, that would have helped. But again, you're shooting at f5, so everything is not going to be in focus. Mainly the center of the frame will be in focus more so than the edges. The edges are going to be a little bit soft because you're at f5. And as you can see here, this background building is a little bit soft, but that's okay. That's just more background stuff. So it's going to blur out just a touch. But I think this was good for something that you just shot straight out of the camera with no post-processing. Yeah, pretty good. But the next image I want to look at of yours, ooh, man, I'm excited about this one, bro. This one. Wow. Okay, so this one was shot at 1/13th of a second. This is a nice look up at the bridge. He's down below the bridge to the left of it, looking up. And the bridge is sort of just going off into the distance, into the city. We have some very, very interesting cloud patterns in the background at night. There's some street lights lighting up everything. The bridge is lit up. The city is lit up. This is a really, 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 really nice capture, sir. Nice work. And you shot this at 1/13th of a second, f4, and ISO 6400. So you see, you're at f4, so you're getting more light in, so your ISO was able to be decreased in this instance, and you're shooting at a slower shutter speed. Okay, so you're getting more light to come in. And the focal length at 20 millimeter on an APS-C sensor, that's still pretty tight because an APS-C sensor is smaller than the full frame, but this works for this particular shot. Okay, this works. I love the framing on this photograph. If anything, I would have wanted it to be just a touch wider to be able to fill it up with this light post here on the left. I'll take myself out the screen so you can see it there. Take this light post off on the left, but that overall, this is quite nice. Now, this is a long exposure opportunity. I've spoken about long exposure photography back on episode 81-ish. Mr. Victor will correct me. He'll have it up on the screen right about now. But long exposure photography is great for nighttime cityscape shots. What you want to do is grab yourself a tripod. You definitely need to get a tripod. and put your camera on the tripod and set that shutter speed to like 1 second or longer. And what's going to happen is you're going to get so much more light coming into your sensor, and it's going to light up all of this stuff in the background, and you can just start to play around with the settings. I wanted to do a tutorial on long exposure photography, but it's been a little bit tricky here the last year or so with this stupid pandemic and things of that nature, as far as going out downtown and shooting photographs at night. I have to be careful. I can't just walk up and just say, hey, I want to take photos of the streets at night. I have to be careful, especially when you get a tripod. So I'm going to continue to work on that, and eventually I will have some footage and B-roll of shooting and setting up long exposure to shoot cityscapes like this. This is an amazing opportunity, and I'm looking forward to showing that off. But well done on this. If I were to do some retouching on this, it wouldn't be too much, because again, you just did a really good job with the actual exposure on it. The horizon line is somewhat good to go. It's almost there. There we go. All right. So we fixed the horizon line. You're going to get a little bit of warping there in the background with the buildings because of the lens. These wide angle lenses will cause some distortion on the edges, but that's okay. You can really fix that in post. I'm not going to get into all of that. I'll just play around with some of the other exposure aspects of it. So I'm going to take the exposure and lift it just a touch, give it a little more contrast so the colors can really pop like so. I'm going to play with the highlights. The highlights are not very bright on this, but I'm going to take them all the way down just to see what it looks like. Yeah, and the highlights, just with no highlights, it just loses life. So we'll just dial it back just a little bit. The shadows here, if we raise the shadows, we should see more detail in the trees in the lower right of the screen. Yep, we do. So we just get a little bit more detail there, so you can see the tree leaves. Clarity and texture, let's push that clarity up like so, but we have to be careful, because the more we push this clarity, if you look at the sky, now we're seeing more noise showing up in the sky. So we have to be careful with that, not to push it too much. But if you want to, keep pushing it, go ahead, because you can do some selective adjustments to remove that noise back there. And then with the color, I wouldn't touch saturation, but I would touch the vibrance. Just push it up a little bit. And yeah, I think that looks good. And if you want to get really, really crazy and creative with the actual color, you can play with the color temperature. As far as the white balance goes, if you cool it off, you're going to get a much cooler sky, like so. Cooler in color temperature, that is. Like that. Or if you just go back and warm it up, the sky goes more so to a purplish, something like that. That's way too warm for me. I like the cooler side of things like that, but that's just my preference. I'm going to do one more trick here. So let's do some noise reduction. This is global noise reduction, and that should have really just cleaned this up. And it looks like it did. Yeah. This is the noise before, as I'm zoomed in on it at 200%. And now cleaning up that noise. Lovely. That's quite nice, my man. Quite nice. Yeah, if you want to print this out and hang it on the wall, I highly recommend, because you got a great image here. Put a little vignette on it just to sort of make everything be highlighted towards the center of the frame, towards that bridge, like that. That's the parrot. Hey, you crushed this shot. Nice work with your grabbing yourself a camera for the first time coming from a phone. Really, really nice work. And thank you for sending it to me. And thank you for allowing me to share this with our folks here at Hands On Photography. All right. So everybody else out there, if you have images and questions, comments, feedback, shoot me an email, hop@twit.tv, the same way Mr. Mark did here. I check them all the time. I'm still getting caught up. I'm almost caught up for once on emails, but yeah, send them on over and I'll be more than happy to answer your questions or provide some feedback for you if you want to have image critiques or things like that. But if you would want your images to appear on the show, you must say that I have your consent to put them up on the show. I know everybody doesn't want their images on the show, and that's fine. And I can't say that I'm putting everybody's out there. Just, depends on timing and things of that nature. But yeah, shoot me an email, hop@twit.tv, and I'll get back to you as quick as I can. All right, folks, that is going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you all so much for the continued support. Really does mean a lot. Do me a favor. Hop on over to your podcast app that you use, and if it has a rating system in it, go ahead and give me a rating. If it has a commenting system in it, go ahead and leave me a comment, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts. Go ahead and rate and comment on the show. It really does help me out. It really does help the show grow in the search engine algorithm, magical world of stuff that I have no idea about. But it really does help. I appreciate that, folks. Thank you to my man, Mr. Victor, for making me look and sound good. Thank you all for following me over on social medias. I am ant_Pruitt on Twitter. I am ant_Pruitt over on Instagram. And folks, hey, let's keep doing what we do each and every week. Safely create and dominate. And I'll see y'all next time.
No ads, just the content. That's what you get when you join Club TWiT. You even get extras like TWiT Plus, our new bonus feed just for members, and exclusive access to the Club TWiT Discord community. Join now for just $7 a month and support TWiT as we continue to create top-notch podcasts you expect and deserve. We're just getting started, so be one of the first to join as we build Club TWiT from the ground up. You could be an early member. Go to twit.tv/clubtwit to learn more and sign up now. Thanks.